It all started with a stranger's note tucked into my journal, a simple piece of paper that shouldn't have meant anything, but it did, because in that moment I was suffocating in a life that felt predictable, safe, and small. But that note, those few words, set me on a path I never saw coming. What followed was both terrifying and liberating, a series of events that made me question everything: who I was, what I wanted, and how far I was willing to go to find myself again. Looking back, I'm still amazed that it all started with a stranger. Or maybe someone who knew me better than I knew myself. But I'll let you decide if it was fate, coincidence, or something else entirely. Let me back up a little. My name is Priya, and on the surface, I suppose you could say I have it all together. I'm in my early 40s, Indian American, with a great career in marketing. I've worked hard to get where I am, and as a single mum, I've done everything to make sure my 12-year-old son has a good life. But the truth? Most days, I feel like I'm running on empty. From 6 a.m. to midnight, I'm everything to everyone, except myself. I juggle deadlines, school pickups, grocery lists, and endless emails. My life is a never-ending checklist, and somewhere along the way, I lost the spark, the part of me that used to dream, feel alive, and just be. It's not just the monotony. I've been divorced for 5 years, and while I tell myself I'm fine being alone, there's this nagging voice in the back of my mind. What if this is it? What if the excitement, the romance, the passion, they're all behind me? I've convinced myself I'm too busy, too old, or maybe just not good enough for all of that anymore. I mean, who has time for dating when you're already stretched so thin? But deep down, I know it's fear. Fear of being vulnerable, of putting myself out there again, of letting someone see the cracks in the facade. And honestly, I didn't think I'd ever get past that fear until the note. It happened on one of those evenings where the rain just wouldn't let up. I was at my favorite little cafe, the kind of place I escape to when I need a break from the noise of my life. It's my haven, dim lighting, the hum of quiet conversations, and the smell of fresh espresso. That night I'd brought my journal with me, something I hadn't touched in months. Maybe I thought writing would help me sort through the restlessness that had been bubbling inside me lately. As I sat there trying to put words to feelings I couldn't quite name, I noticed him. A man sitting at a corner table, early 40s, maybe a little older. There was something magnetic about him, his calm presence, the way he seemed completely at ease with himself. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, and then again. I quickly looked away, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and embarrassment, like I'd been caught daydreaming. Eventually I packed up to leave, shaking off the moment as nothing more than a fleeting distraction. But as I flipped my journal shut, I noticed something that hadn't been there before, a folded piece of paper tucked neatly inside the pages. My heart skipped a beat. I looked around the room, but no one seemed out of place. Slowly, I unfolded the note. The handwriting was bold, confident. I see a fire in you that's begging to be set free. Meet me here at 8 p.m. tomorrow. No pressure, just curiosity. A friend. I reread it 3 times, trying to make sense of it. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of joke. Who does this? My second thought, well, it wasn't exactly a thought. It was this rush of something I hadn't felt in years. Excitement. And then just as quickly, the doubt crept in. Why me? What fire? Do I even have the courage to show up? I debated all night. Fear told me to forget it, tear up the note and move on. But a small part of me, the part I hadn't listened to in years, was whispering something else. What if this wasn't about him at all? What if this was about me? The next day was a blur. I couldn't focus at work, and every little thing felt like a sign pointing back to the note. By 7:30 that evening, I was standing in front of the cafe, my heart racing. I was angry at myself for even being there, but I couldn't stop wondering, what if? What if this was the beginning of something I didn't even know I needed? I walked in, scanning the room for him. My chest tightened when I realized he wasn't there. Disappointment? Relief? Maybe a little of both. I almost turned to leave, but then I saw it. Another note, folded neatly and waiting for me on the very table I'd sat at the night before. My hands trembled as I opened it. It read, "You took the first step, brave. Now the question is, how far will you go?" My stomach flipped. Who was doing this? Was it him? Was he watching me? The thrill I'd felt the night before started to fade, replaced by something colder. Unease. But it wasn't enough to make me leave. Not yet. At the bottom of the note there was an address, an art gallery across town. I stared at it for a long moment, torn between the safety of my routine and the pull of something I couldn't explain. I wasn't sure if I wanted romance, adventure, or answers. Maybe all three. All I knew was that I was going. Against my better judgment, or maybe because of it, I was going. When I arrived at the gallery, the place was nearly empty, save for a quiet attendant at the front desk who barely glanced up as I walked in. The space was dimly lit, the air thick with the faint smell of paint and varnish. I almost turned back, but then I saw the paintings, row after row of them, each one more captivating than the last. They weren't just paintings, they were stories, moments frozen in time. I found myself drawn to a series of portraits of women. Each painting seemed to capture something raw, something painfully real. One showed a young woman gazing out of a window, her expression a mix of hope and hesitation. Another depicted an older woman standing in the rain, her face weary but defiant, vulnerable, strong, in love, alone. Each one seemed to hold a piece of something I couldn't quite name, but it felt familiar. And then I saw it. My eyes locked on a painting of a woman sitting at a desk surrounded by papers, her head in her hands. I felt a lump in my throat because it was as if someone had reached into my life and painted me. That's when I noticed a small envelope taped to the bottom corner of the frame. My heart raced as I peeled it off and unfolded the note inside. It read, "This is your story. You've forgotten who you are. Rewrite it." The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, memories came flooding back, staying up late in my 20s to write poetry that no one would ever read, sketching on the backs of napkins during college lectures. The thrill I used to feel when I created something just for myself, not for a deadline, a paycheck, or anyone else's approval. Somewhere along the way, I'd let that part of me go, trading it for stability, practicality, and the illusion of control. And yet here it was, staring me in the face, asking me to remember. I turned around, half expecting to find the stranger standing behind me, but the gallery was empty. I scanned the room, searching for someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening. That's when a woman stepped forward. She was elegant, with a knowing smile, and she introduced herself as the gallery owner. Her words caught me off guard. "You've been coming here for months, always sitting in that same cafe across the street, always writing in that journal. I thought you might need a little reminder of the fire you still have in you." I was stunned. I'd never even noticed this gallery before, let alone met her. And yet, somehow, she'd been watching, waiting for the right moment to pull me out of the fog I'd been living in. She wasn't a stranger, not exactly. She was a mirror, reflecting back the part of me I'd been too afraid to see. I stared at the gallery owner, her words sinking in, but something still didn't add up. How did she know so much about me? About my journal, my habits, my restlessness? Before I could ask, I heard a familiar voice behind me, a voice I hadn't heard in months. So, did it work? I turned, and there she was, Anita, my best friend since college, the person who knew me better than anyone, and the same person I'd been avoiding for months because I couldn't bring myself to admit how unhappy I'd been. She was standing there with that same mischievous grin she used to have when we were 20 and pulling off elaborate pranks in our dorm. I was stunned. "Wait," I said, still piecing it together. "This was you?" She laughed, a warm sound that somehow made me feel both ridiculous and loved. "You've been running on fumes for so long, Priya. I've been watching you shrink into yourself, burying everything you love under work and responsibilities. I didn't know how else to get your attention, so I teamed up with the gallery owner. I thought, maybe if you felt a little mystery, a little spark, you might wake up and remember who you are." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to be angry at her meddling, at the trickery. But mostly, I felt seen, deeply, painfully seen. She wasn't wrong. I'd been living in fear, convincing myself that I had no time, no space for anything that wasn't safe or necessary, and in doing that, I'd let go of everything that made me me. I thought it was some kind of romance, I admitted, half laughing, half embarrassed. I thought someone saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. Anita's smile softened. "Priya, you don't need someone else to see it. You've always had it. You've just forgotten how to look. If you don't love yourself first, no one else can fill that gap for you." Her words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't about romance, or a stranger, or even the notes. This was about me. About realizing that the life I was waiting for wasn't going to come from someone else. It had to come from me. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to take the first step toward finding it. That night, I learned something the hard way. No one is coming to save you, but sometimes that's the best gift life can give you. Because only you can rewrite your story. I realized that the fire I had been waiting for, the spark that I thought someone else could ignite, had always been inside me. It was time to stop waiting and start living on my own terms. I decided then and there that I was going to pick up my old hobbies, writing, painting, anything that brought me joy, without expecting anything in return. I would start dating, yes, but this time without the fear or the pressure of trying to be perfect for someone else. And above all, I would prioritize my own happiness. Because if I couldn't love myself, how could I ever let anyone else truly love me? Sometimes the greatest adventure begins the moment you decide to stop hiding from yourself, and I'm just getting started.